Welcome, Nina Slama, Nataliya, Butyrska. Good afternoon from Indian time. Nina Slama, good afternoon from Indian time.
Good afternoon, sir.
I think good morning from London time. Rajesh Mishra ji, it is morning time.
Hello, good morning.
Extension of ODI office.
Extension which sort of
charger
okay.
I am waiting for Professor Arvind Chauhan, co-chairperson.
Sure.
There is a lot of problem in internet connectivity in morning session. Many persons could not present.
Okay. I mean, there's a problem at your site, or
You are muted, sir.
unable to hear your voice.
Jabalpur University from
Yes, fine.
University, and also from one girl could not join. But later on, they joined and presented the paper.
Okay.
I think he's not picking up call. So I think we should start and he may join. Professor Rajesh Mishra is present. So let me introduce first Professor Rajesh Mishra. He was Professor of Sociology and head of the department at the University of Lucknow, Lucknow in Uttar Pradesh, one of the capital of Uttar Pradesh in India. He is now connected from London. Nowadays, he most of the time stay at London. So then we have uh, uh, Nataliya Butyrska. She is a very senior journalist and also engaged in training of the diplomats in Ukraine. And she writes a lot in different platforms, digital as well as in printed magazines and other publications. And she has already presented twice in our conferences. And it was a very nice experience to listen her on Russia-Ukraine war. I have with me today another speaker from Israel. She is Nina Slama. She is from Richmond University, Herzliya, Israel. And I think she has been in India for quite some time and worked also in India. And she is, has appeared on different YouTube channels and also main TV channels in context of the present conflict taking place in between Israel and Hamas. Bhavani Suri is one of the delegates. She actively participated in few last 3 days, and she is from Bombay, quite active, and she is doing PhD from Delhi University, Canada at present. And there are others. So briefly now I hand over the charge to the chairman of this session, Professor Rajesh Mishra, proceeding in this session.
Thank you very much, Professor Virendra Singh. You gave me this opportunity to listen to these two speakers on an issue which is which concerns all, not only people living in Ukraine or citizens of Ukraine or citizens of Israel or Palestine. I mean, in fact, we have been passing through a century of conflicts. And I often label this period as conflict-ridden times. And conflicts are not one kind, one type. There's so many types of conflicts, conflicts within a country, conflicts between nations, and within a country, so many conflicts, because we Indians can feel relatively more because we are very big population. And not only big population, but this population is divided into various groups, castes, religions, nationalities, ethnicities, and so on and so forth. And we also experience these kind of conflicts within our nation. And not only these macro conflicts, but meso kind of conflicts also. I mean, we are wrapped in meso kind of conflicts, and also micro conflicts within persons, within families, between families, spouses, and so on and so forth. The point is that it's a good, very good exercise to ponder over one kind of conflicts. These two conflicts, and nowadays they are the most talked about conflicts. And if we read any media, any newspapers, social media, they are full of reports about these conflicts, many a times propagandist reports. So it is relevant to think over these two wars or conflicts from a relatively more social scientific viewpoint. One by, we welcome Nataliya. I have heard Nataliya before also in your conference. And Nina Salma, we also welcome her. And I think that this session would be a very nice session. If you permit, if I'll be permitted, time is left, then perhaps I would also reflect a little bit on these two presentations. So again, good morning from here and good afternoon to all our Indian participants. With these words, I invite Ms. Nataliya, Dr. Nataliya first, perhaps, and thereafter Ms. Nina. So, Dr. Nataliya, you are welcome. You are invited. You can take your own time. I don't know how much time Professor Virendra Singh would like to provide us.
There is sufficient time, 2 hours time.
So you take your own time.
Yeah, there is no problem of time.
Let us be enlightened.
You take your own time.
About this war, this conflict between Ukraine and Russian Federation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, dear organizers, dear participants, and dear guests. It's a great honor for me to take part in today's conference, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about media narratives and global warfare in situation of Ukraine. One of the key elements of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine is the informational front. Information warfare and real warfare are intertwined to each other. In Russia, the entire information strategy is subordinated to a single decision-making center and operates in contribution with other factors, the military component, economic pressure, and energy blackmail. Russia information warfare played a decisive role in the hybrid war against Ukraine in 2014. During 2030-2040, Ukraine underwent political cataclysm and change of power, making it inequality prepared to effectively counter Russian information warfare, both within the country and beyond its borders. The goal of Russia's information hybrid war in 2014 was evident: to undermine the state order of Ukraine, sow chaos and destabilization among people. Russian invasion started not with direct military actions, but with disinformation, manipulation, propaganda through mass media. And the Ukrainian information space was highly vulnerable to Russian influence due to common information space, due to common language, due to social medias, and also due to oligarch media, which was paid by Russia in Ukraine. And Russia started actively promoting the idea of the Russian world, Ruski Mir, emphasizing ideological, cultural, and linguistic connection between Ukrainians and Russians, while simultaneously creating fictions images of Nazi and fascist, those individuals who stood for the right of the Ukrainian people to their independence, language, identity, and the choice of their own development path, distinct from the Soviet and Russian past. The hybrid aggression of Russia against Ukraine began in Crimea and in Donbass through the use of irregular armed forces, local criminal groups, and little green men who turned out to be Russian regular troops. At the same time, the Kremlin officially denied its involvement in the armed conflict, attempted to portray it as an internal conflict between the so-called Kyiv regime and citizens who wish to live in Russia. For example, during the illegal annexation of Crimea and the occupation of Donbass, Russian journalists fabricated interviews about the situation, seemingly with local residents. But in reality, these were individuals came from Russia, for example, who faced persons as part of special operations. And the Russians also actively use special factories of trolls and bots, which artificially reinforce certain narratives, and journalists quoted them as real people. The information war became decisive for the occupation of Ukrainian territories at that time, because the international community was misinformed and did not know how to react to this situation at the beginning. One of the most known examples of disinformation and falsification was the shoot down of the Malaysian flight MH17 on July 7th, 2014 by Russian army. Moscow used a wide range of measures in an attempt to hide its involvement in the crime. On December 20, 2017, the UK Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee, in its report, specifically emphasized that Russia is waging an information war on a massive scale, which is expressed in intensive multi-channel propaganda, which is conducted with the aim of convincing the world that Russia is not responsible for downing of MH17. Atlantic Council Analysis released a report on Russian propaganda from 2014 to February 2022, the basis assertion of which shaped public opinion about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Based on this date, a list of propagandistic statements about Ukraine disseminated by Russian mass media was compiled. Among them, the Ukrainian army and volunteer formations show cruelty. Ukraine turned into a failed state after following Europe. Ukrainians are Nazis. Reforms in Ukraine are direct against Russians. Russia is not aggressor. Ukraine supports terrorism. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion on February 24th, 2022, Ukraine seized the initiative in information warfare. Information networks have started to counter bots and trolls, and Ukrainian authorities have engaged in active communication with external and internal audience to counter Russian propaganda. Local fixers and journalists provide on-the-spot coverage of the conflict, which helps reduce the impact of Russian propaganda. The special feature of digital warfare is that it's now possible to follow events in real time and refute false information. Although foreign mass media have their correspondence in Ukraine, and it helps to inform foreign audience about what is really happening in Ukraine. It becomes difficult for Russian propagandists to justify the shelling of civilian infrastructure, schools, and residential buildings under the pretext that Ukrainian soldiers were allegedly stationed there. Because foreign journalists are on the territory of Ukraine and can immediately get to the scene of events. Moreover, even they often fall under touched strikes by Russian troops against civilians, as, for example, happened during the shelling of pizzeria in the front city of Kramatorsk, when the Iskander missile hit journalists from Britain, Belgium, and Colombia, where they were injured, but the Ukrainian writer accompanying them died. This is just a simple example. Since February 24th, 2022, 68 journalists have died in Ukraine. However, it should not be underestimated the possibilities of Russian disinformation activities. Russia managed to remove part of the aggressor's responsibility and launch its own version of the war against Ukraine, consistently repeating that it is the US and the West waging war against Russia by the hands of Ukrainians. Antipathy towards NATO, the US, and the perception of Russia as a superpower create the favorable conditions for the spread of pro-Russian narratives in the media of the global South, even some Western media. And Russia is actively spreading the thesis that it was forced to start the war because of a threat of its national security, despite the fact that 8 years ago, Russia seized part of Ukrainian territories, and previously in 2008, part of Georgian territories, and Ukraine or Georgia are part of NATO and was not part of NATO at that time. Minoring is a typical tactic to divert attention of Russian propaganda. Its main purpose is to divert attention from one's own actions and shift the blame to the opponent. For example, Russia accused Ukraine of creating a dirty bomb to divert attention from the Russian seizure of Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Ukraine invited International Atomic Energy Agency representatives to all nuclear facilities there in Ukraine to refuse this information. And international inspectors have confirmed that Ukraine is not developing a dirty bomb. At the same time, Russia was not punished in any way for deliberately spreading disinformation. In addition, this news helped divert the world's attention from the action of the Russian Federation as a nuclear facility. After the revelation of the Russian crimes in Bucha, in Irpin, and other cities of Ukraine, Russia declared that these were staged videos, although the fact of the crimes was recorded by international journalists and representatives of international organizations from the sphere of justice. Instead, Russia appealed to the fact that Ukraine have abused the residents of Donbass for 8 years. This thesis was constantly advanced by Russian propagandists and was used as a pretext for a full-scale invasion. But over the years, Russia has not provided any evidence of crimes committed by Ukraine to relevant international organizations. So this information warfare of Russia is aimed at manipulating the facts and diverting attention from the fact that Russia occupied Ukrainian territories and is waging a full-scale war against Ukraine. That Russian army is on the territory of Ukraine, but not instead. That the Russian army is committing genocide against Ukrainians, and these testimonies were witnessed by international organizations investigating the actions of the Russian army of the territory of Ukraine. that Russia forcibly passports Ukrainians in the occupied territories and kidnaps Ukrainian children and takes them to its territories. Instead, due to its information influence, the Russian Federation tried to portray Ukraine not as an independent object of geopolitics. Russia actively promotes that Ukraine is a failed state. The Ukrainian government is neo-Nazi, illegitimate and discredited, passing the blame for illegal aggression against Ukraine on the US and NATO, which, according to Russian propagandists, apparently benefits from the war by weakening of Russia, accusing the USA of exerting pressure on Europe, which does not want to fight, but it is influenced by the US. Statements about the harmfulness of sanctions for the countries that impose them, but not for Russia itself. Given the Ukrainian-Russia conflict a local character and asserting that it does not have a serious impact on global processes, Russia conducts a targeted information warfare against the supply of arms to Ukraine by its Western partners, as if these actions are fueling the conflict rather than bringing peace. At the same time, Russia itself actively buys weapons from Iran and North Korea. Although Russian politicians, including Putin himself, accuse Ukraine of not wanting to negotiate about peace deal. During a recent speech at the G20, Putin tried to portray himself as a peacemaker and noted, military actions are always a tragedy for some people, some families, and the country in general. Of course, we should think about how to stop this tragedy. Putin manipulated the fact the tragedy of Ukrainians can be ended by Putin personally if he stops the war. In fact, his accusation was that Ukrainians do not want to capitulate to the illegal actions of Russia and seek to return their legal territories. At the same time, Russia and Putin want to stop the capture of Ukrainian territories. The proof of it is the fact that Russia increased the military budget for the next year by 70%, implements military economy measures, and shows no signs of readiness to end hostilities. So this strategy will continue, unfortunately. Moscow is trying to force Ukraine to give up the fight using the information campaigns aimed at weakening Western support and creating pressure from Western countries on Ukraine to agree to Moscow's terms. During this year, the Russian information warfare was aimed at undermining the faith of Western partners in the victory of Ukraine. On the one hand, the Russian authorities are demonstrating their own readiness to wage a long war of attrition and thereby frighten the West. Also, the fact that Moscow turned to North Korea for weapons indicates that depletion of the military resources of Russian Federation and calls into question the long-term military capabilities of Russia. It appears that such manipulation occurs in order to create fear in the circles of Western countries due to the probability of a long-term conflict, and also to force them to put pressure on Ukraine to make concession to Moscow. On the other hand, the Russians are trying to influence European pacifists and promote slogans beneficial to them. For example, the most common recently are that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has failed, that Europeans are suffering from consequences of the war and it needs to be ended. At the same time, the fact that Ukraine continues its counteroffensive actions and is slowly moving forward. Moreover, during this year, Ukraine caused significant losses to the Black Sea Fleet of Russia. At the beginning of the war, Moscow actively involved its fleet in military operation and blockaded Ukrainian ports. Russia had total superiority at sea. The Ukrainian military destroyed 15 and damaged 11 Russian warships of the Black Sea Fleet, forcing Russia to withdraw its fleet from Sevastopol in Crimea and move into Novorossiysk in Russia and Feodosia. Thanks to this, 3 Ukrainian ports have resumed work, and now Ukrainians can use sea routes to trade their products without any agreement with Russia. Success of the fight against the Russian fleet has a strategic importance for the return of Crimea. For this reason, this information is silenced by the Russian information machine, as well as by many international mass media, which recently actively spread the message about the inability of Ukraine to return its territories and the invisibility of Russia. Russian propagandists generate a lot of false narratives to discredit Ukraine and undermine the trust of foreign audience in Ukrainians. Recently, researchers have discovered a large number of fake messages aimed at Western countries. The idea is being promoted that the social standard of living of Europeans is decreasing because of aid of Ukraine and Ukrainian refugees. Facts are being distorted because of Russia's aggression. About 6 million Ukrainians were forced to leave their homes and seek refuge in Europe. Economic and social problems, both in Europe and in Ukraine, are also caused by the consequences of Russian aggression against Ukraine, which has been going on for almost 2 years. European sanctions against mass media have only partly reduced the Kremlin's ability to spread disinformation through its own television channels and information platforms that previously operated in Europe, like Sputnik or Russia Today. However, Russia propaganda uses loopholes to spread its influence on the European audience in particular. It creates mirror sites, pages in social networks, content on social platforms X, TikTok, Facebook, Telegram. The analyst of the international information field shows a significant number of journalists and authors of Russian origin and paid by Russian Federation who were able to legalize and gain a foothold in international news agencies. Pro-Russian politicians, university professors, former military personnel, and ex-diplomats who regularly appears on Western television and repeat pro-Kremlin narratives are also an important source of promoting pro-Russian messages. Information warfare currently is one of the decisive factors of victory. This is especially important for Ukraine, which is waging an asymmetric war against a nuclear state with superior military potential. The level of political support, the amount of aid, the scale of sanctions imposed against the aggressor depends on how Ukraine is perceived abroad. With the beginning of the occupation of Crimea and Donetsk and Lugansk regions, Russia's information policy turned into a total military disinformation aggression aimed at demonizing the leadership of Ukraine in the eyes of consumers of this information. Ukraine was able to win the first round of information confrontation at the beginning of a full-scale invasion on February 24, 2022. openness, high professional level of organization of the information campaign by the Office of President, the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Ukrainian journalists, the willingness and ability to defend one's position in the world mass media, working in social networks, became the basis of the Ukrainian strategy, which gave effect. However, Russia took into account the lessons and prepared not only for a new physical offensive on the Eastern Front, but also for a new informational counterattack. Russian propaganda is actively spreading disinformation that discredits Ukraine on the international state. And recently, Russia has also intensified its campaign inside Ukraine, aimed to dividing society, discrediting the Ukrainian government, and according to President Zelensky, trying to provoke internal destabilization. The Kremlin has not been able to defeat Ukraine and achieve its goals, so it is trying to intensify internal contradictions to weaken the country from within, and then using the already tested method in Crimea and Donbass to win through the fragmentation of Ukrainian society. So the information warfare of the Russian Federation against Ukraine is no less dangerous than military actions. It is capable of seriously undermining the unity of Ukrainian society, citizens' trust in the authorities and the armed forces, Ukrainians' relations with allied state. So the Ukrainian authorities are forced to confront the Russia on the military, information, and diplomatic force. That's all my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be glad to answer your question if you have.
Thank you very much, Professor Singh. We would like to hear both of them, and thereafter we discuss or one by one. You tell.
But I think one by one also we can discuss and later on combine together. Otherwise, sometimes we forget our observations.
Definitely. Sure. So now this is open for discussion. Any observation, any questions would be invited.
Yes, I think that Ukraine case is a very specific one from sociological point of view and also from the viewpoint of geopolitics. And I think for that, I will point out that the other conflict is also very important from geopolitics point of view. So, first of all, I would like to highlight the sociological significance of the problem. In my opinion, between postmodernism and globalization, there is a lot of debate on modernity. I think that these conflict situation has some relationship with the problem or crisis of modernity. As we have witnessed in intellectual circles and also at the societal level, particularly in the Western society, which include East Europe and larger part of Russia also, we find that there are two important sociological constructs to understand the changing scenario in these societies. One was the concept of the multiple modernity developed by Essen Eisenstadt. Essen Eisenstadt has been a very, leading sociologist from Israel, and his contribution on modernity and modernization is very basic. And in 90s, he developed this concept, particularly after the dismantling of the USSR. He made two important points. One, he says that USSR was a case of failed modernity. And that was one of the reasons that why it could not be continue as union, and it dismantled. This is, I think, dismantling of the USSR is very important in context of the present crisis between Russia and Ukraine, and earlier in case of his invasion to Georgia also, and there also he tried to expand its territory. So one problem with Russia is that their status as a superpower has, totally vanished after the downfall of the USSR. So in last 30 years, there is a strategy to regain that or to expand its territory, and Ukraine is one of the victims of USSR. Oh, sorry, Russia. This is one, I think, important. Other is that crisis of modernity has banished most of the institutions which established after Second World War, and particularly United Nations. United Nations is now totally irrelevant body. It is good for nothing. If you see the history of United Nations, the first case or issue which it was supposed to resolve was this Palestine and Israel conflict, which is not resolved at all till today. Any other resolution or any other conflict or anything you see, UN has not been able to stop any superpower because of its structural fallacies. Because the structure they have made, it is totally irrelevant in today's context. And in my opinion, the most of the international agencies are defunct in the era of globalization, totally failed and dysfunction. So this is also one important point from, and there is a need to re-establish new institutions for global governance. Because now we have moved from interrelations to global governance, and we need some new institutions. The European Union was to some extent successful in resolving the crisis of the economy of the European country, but it also not much successful, and their policies are not so relevant today. The changes which are taking place at the global level, particularly the refugee problem in Europe. And when democracy and the civil society were formed in France and Europe in the 19th century, there are a lot of debate on socialism, democracy, and they evolved law by rule by constitution. So the philosophy which was, because modernity came in Europe after it took to evolve 300 to 400 years. Intellectual deliberations continue among the different scholars, politicians, and others, and then it evolved in Europe. So they have never expected this kind of developments, that a huge number of refugees will come in their society and they will become a problem. And they will take all the advantages from the liberal policies of the European countries, and then they will create problems based on their ideology. So ideological problems are very important, and two ideology, authoritarian ideology and the religious ideology, particularly ideology of radical Islam. These are the two main dangers for all the societies of the world, I would say. So these two dangers are, and you see that how there is a collaboration between these two. If you see the present global order which is emerging, that is on the one hand Russia, China, North Korea, all the three authoritarian states, then they are now combined with Iran, and Turkey is nowhere. Sometimes in NATO, and sometimes he hobnob with Russia. So I think, and Belarus, that is again ally of Russia. So some authoritarian forces you see are polarizing on the one, and the liberal democracy on the other. Ukraine adopted liberal democracy. Israel is a democracy. India also facing this kind of problems inside and outside, and we are in a condition that we cannot take side of anyone, but we are aware that we are in problem. The problem which are faced by today's society in Middle East, like Israel, we are facing this kind of problem for decades. I would say decades, not decades. I think the whole history of India, if you see, it is the history of invasion from 11th century till today in different forms. We have been the victim of this kind of invasions and imposition of certain values on our society. So I think these are some of the important issues which we have to look into. And in information war, paid media is playing a very dangerous role. And I observed in last 1.5 years when Ukraine-Russia conflict started, that there are certain channels, private TV channels, which cover the warfare 24/7. All the time they are covering wars only. And they have high bias. And I'm surprised that every day they are saying there is a danger of nuclear war. Every day. And they try to justify, you now see that what Putin will do. He is very angry with this act of Ukraine. And now you see that he will use nuclear weapons to resolve this conflict. This is continuously, I am listening for more than 1 year, but till now there is nothing like that. So this is how the propaganda and the information war takes place. In my opinion, these channels are paid channels propagating a particular kind of narrative in media and to influence the people. So this is how narratives are created by media. And but in case of, I will discuss in my later part after presentation of Nina, that how this channel is doing in case of Hamas conflict. So propaganda, actually media play an important role in this. And from the Second World War, there are studies of propaganda by Robert K. Merton. He was first who studied how radio has been used for propaganda in Second World War. And I think mass media are very important instrument for propaganda, or their main function is to do propaganda for one or the other. So they are not neutral, they are highly biased. Every channel, every YouTuber, they have their own bias. They try to create narrative in favor of someone. And in social media, there is a division between different social media producers who create YouTube clips, video clips, and in main media also there is a division among the channels on preference of their ideology or the payment they are receiving from some agencies. So I think we have to look into this conflict if we study from academic point of view on along these points: modernity, propaganda, information war, and I think Nataliya has have given very good examples of that how information war is going on from Russian side against Ukraine. And some say that Ukraine is also doing information war through Western media. So there are allegations from both sides. But I think mass media is meant for propaganda. So it is not a new thing. It is very old since Second World War. So these are some of my observations at present, and I will give my observation after second presentation.
Any other question or observation?
Is it okay if I can give just a little bit? I'm Bhavani Suri. I hope
Sure.
you can hear me.
Sure.
I do agree with Nataliya to a great extent. But at the same time, when it comes to gender narratives, and if I were to directly point out, there are two things. One is Russia considers itself a motherland, and Ukraine says fatherland. And this is a big dissection, especially when it comes to gender narratives. And as a result, it's not just women, women and children who are displaced, women and children who suffer in these things, in these wars and these geopolitical displacements. It is also the senior citizens, the older people, handicapped. There are genders there too. They suffer as well, in this. So I think if it has to evolve, I think I also was reading a paper on one of the ladies. She's very beautifully, she's put this, she's Emily Winterbottom. Again, I agree with Nataliya about the Western narratives, where they take a lot of this thing, they're taken into account, I don't know, maybe blindly. It says over here that Russian narratives intimate Ukraine's supposedly subordinate role in geopolitical terms by describing Ukraine as a loose woman in need of saving by its older brother. Ukrainian male politicians are presented as sissy boys and no match for real men of pro-Russian politics. President Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov are presented as the masculine ideal compared to the seemingly deviant male and female protagonists who are damsels in distress to legitimize the war. So, like I said, once again, this is a Western narrative too, and I agree with Nataliya to a great extent, but I thought I should just put this out there, as an observation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other observation or question? No. So, I would also like to have some, I have many questions, many observations, but I would like to point out only 2 or 3. One is about media, which Professor Virendra raised this issue. Media conceptually, by definition, is a medium. We'll have to ponder over medium of what. Is in fact the medium of, I feel, in a war situation or in a conflict situation, any kind of conflict, micro to macro, as has been pointed out by Professor Virendra, that all tools of media, they have been used by both the parties, not one. Because in conflict, there are 2 parties involved. So when I go through, for example, BBC or CNN or these kind of media, internationally acclaimed media, and they are acclaimed because of their objectivity, I find that when they cover war, they humanize one party, or they give cases in plenty of one party, and they in fact either gloss over or they dehumanize the other party. So in this conflict, I find also then I go for Russian media or that kind of media. I find this. But the point is that media should be considered as only a medium of propaganda. This is my first point. May it be mainstream media, or may it be a social media, because when these wars are going on, I follow so many handles of social media of they are located in Ukraine or located in Russia or other kind of people, and find very clearly the same case. When they report from two different points of view. So it is right to observe that this is not only a war of one war, is a war of propaganda as well. And this war of propaganda can be found in a war or conflict at the micro level. This is one observation I wanted. You can reflect on this. There is another. And when we are considering two parties, then I only would raise in the context of this war, Ukraine war, that these two parties of very different kind. One is Russian Federation, would they claim, and we know that history of Russia, that historically Russia has passed through two kinds of imperialism. It has been an empire, a feudal kind of empire, where it waged wars and conflicts and oppression on all kinds of people around. For example, there is a very famous Circassian genocide done by these Russian people is long back, 17th, 18th century, at the turn of 17th, 18th century. So that they were at war with their subjects, what they call empire. And as far as I consider, Ukraine is also in the thinking, in the mind of Russian people, Russian rulers, is a kind of, they are kind of subjects. Because when they started becoming independent, not very long back, just 2014, the signs of independence started occurring in this Ukraine. Russian Federation became very conscious. First, it annexed Crimea. Now, they don't want to annex the whole Ukraine. They want to annex only a part of Ukraine, as I feel so. Because this, and another phase was of socialist imperialism, what I call. So there are three kinds of imperialism in this world. One is four kinds. One was feudal imperialism. Then there was a secular imperialism, and then economic imperialism, and this socialist imperialism. So the logic of this conflict and the use of media, use of power, can also be unfolded by understanding the logic of imperialism. That one is oppressed, occupier power, and another is occupied, oppressed people. So this kind of a logic can help in understanding both kind of propaganda. For example, another question I would like to raise about this Ukraine, and this is the question, in fact, you can reflect upon. And the question is that, don't you think that, of course, we are living in a one-polar world, but only sweepingly calling it one-polar world is not okay. So when NATO and European Union started expanding beyond particular societies, beyond those societies, they started reaching Ukraine and other parts of previously what was called Soviet Union. So don't you think that this kind of expansion of NATO, European Union also played a definite role in this conflict, in the beginning, I mean, in the initiation of this conflict? Here you will have to take into account one fact, and the fact is that this NATO or European Union, they are expanding with a purpose. And the purpose is not only economic, purpose is political as well. So don't you think that Ukraine is in the midst of these things? After Israel war, almost America is withdrawing its help, its aid, and its role in the Ukraine war, and leaving Ukraine in a very bad situation. I think that so. I mean, this is one. So these are very complex issues of this war. I only pointed out 2-3 observations. You can answer those, or you can reflect upon as you. Dr. Nataliya.
Thank you for your reflections, because it's very important to interconnect and hear your visions, because I'm live in Ukraine, I'm stay in this situation, and also I'm staying under the very big informational warfare which Russia sent to our people. And maybe in some way my opinion would be as Ukrainian people who try to show our position. And as a Ukrainian, I'm not looking at this conflict as only NATO, for example, period, and the period after the Soviet Union was destroyed. For as an Ukrainian, this war is first of all colonial war. We started at least 300 years ago. From that time, we stay in the fight with Russia Federation for our identity, for our Ukrainian language, for our history, and so on. So it's not easy for us to explain all people around the world the nature of this war, and to protect our vision facing very professional and very strong Russia propaganda, Russia position, because yes, Russia is superpower, and a lot of countries of the world looking at this conflict, at Ukraine position, and at Ukrainian visions through this country, through this information, this reality. But I think that our country had a small success in protecting our vision, in protecting our position now. And I think that this time when Russia started full-scale war, our government made a very good strategy to inform international community about situation in Ukraine. And I think it would be a very good help for us in offensive our country, in fighting for our rules. Because for us, it's not about fighting fighting with, for example, NATO and superpowers. For us, for me personally, it is our fight for our life, for our prosperity, for our future. And that's why I would like to thank you all that you gave me opportunity to tell vision of Ukraine as Ukrainian people, maybe with a little bit emotions. Yes, I know, because I'm journalist, and sometimes I would like to show you with all the colors of feelings, not very scientific position, but a little bit journalistic position. But thank you, and thank you for your understanding, and thank you for your support in this situation.
Thank you very much. Thank you
I
very much.
would like to make one observation at this juncture.
Yes.
I think one important thing in case of conflict is that war is on the land of Ukraine. Russia is not much affected by that, and this is a war for, in this there is a question of survival or existence in case of Ukraine. So this has more impact on the population of Ukraine, their infrastructures, their military institutions are destroyed like anything by Russian Air Force particularly. And to survive in these conditions for about 2 years, I think it is a very big thing in the history of the world, I would say. Only parallel example is in India, and that is in Mewar, who continued for generations against the Mughal empires. So this is the war against the empires. And here I will recall Amitai Adjani, who has written From Empire to Community, and he has written a critique of the American society as well as of Russia as an empire. He says these are not superpower, they are modern empires, and both have their followings and they behave like empires. So he has written a very good critique of even of American society. America is also behave like an empire. So I think these are the very important observations of Amitai Adjani, and he also suggested one model that how we can go for a better kind of society, and he suggests the idea of community. And it is very different what Tony had suggested in 19th century. But I think we should see this from point of view that how the societies are struggling, and similar cases for Israel. They are also fighting for their existence. Otherwise, their existence itself will be vanished. So I think we should, there are two similarities in these two conflicting situations, that is struggle for existence. Yes.
It's fine. Now we should invite Dr. Nina Slama.
Slama.
Slama. Sorry for pronunciation. To present her paper on Israel.
So thank you, Professor Singh, Professor Mishra, and Professor Chauhan, and all the organizers for organizing the International Conference on Media, Gender, and Development in the Era of Globalization. Before I will talk about the current war in Israel, I would like to say that today we are also commemorating the tragic 26/11 Mumbai attack that were perpetrated in India 15 years ago in 2008. In these attacks, 166 people were killed and 300 people were injured. And I would like to express my heartfelt condolences to all the casualties in these attacks. And these attacks shows that terrorism is a worldwide threat that should be dealt with the collaboration of all countries in the world. So first of all, I will discuss about the October 7 attacks. We are still here in Israel in the midst of the war. In the morning of October 7th, Hamas terrorist organization launched a combined attack through the air, the sea, and the ground. In this attack, the Hamas terrorist organization killed, tortured, raped, beheaded, mutilated, dismembered, and brutally kidnapped men, women, children, babies, and elderly people in Israel. They cleansed more than 22 towns in Israel, and while firing more than 5,000 rockets from the Gaza Strip to Israel. These attacks were taking place on a Shabbat, which is the Jewish day of rest, celebrated each and every Saturday. And this was also the Jewish festival of Simchat Torah, which celebrate not only the end of the cycle of reading the Torah, which is the Bible, the sacred book of the Jewish people, but also starting a new cycle of reading the Torah during each and every Shabbat, which is the day of the Jewish state, the day of the rest, of the Jewish rest. So since the war erupted, more than 1,400 people were murdered, more than 7,700 people were injured, more than 240 people were kidnapped. And as we're talking, there are rounds of releasing of some of the hostages in Israel, with a lot of challenges and uncertainties ahead. More than 10,000 of rockets and missiles were fired, not only from the Gaza Strip, but also from Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. There were also attempts of firing rockets from the West Bank as well. More than 200,000 Israelis were displaced from their homes. And we're talking about a tragedy, attacks that killed the most Jews since the Holocaust, and we are still in the midst of the war. So when Hamas terrorist organization perpetrated their attacks, they were not only armed with weapons, grenades, axes, and RPGs, but also with cameras. They filmed all the atrocities that they inflicted on the Israeli soldiers and civilians and posted the visuals on Telegram. They also used personal cell phones of the victims and posted the atrocities they perpetrated on them on their social media handlers. So we can just imagine a granddaughter of a civilian, an Israeli civilian, seeing her grandmother killed by terrorists on Facebook. This is a real story. It is important to understand that the objective of Hamas terrorist organization is not only to perpetrate deadly attacks, but also to disseminate fear and terror through different means. And this is true for all terrorist organizations. Waging a psychological war that could undermine the resilience of people and countries around the world. It is important to understand that Israel is combating this war in different fronts. As Dr. Nataliya mentioned, there is, of course, the battlefield, but also the diplomatic front, the psychological front, the information front, the advocacy front, and so on. Now, all the figures and the information that is coming from the Gaza Strip are provided by Hamas terrorist organization. They're spreading fake news to the world in order to gain international support. One example is the hit on El Ali hospital in Gaza. Hamas declared that Israel hit the hospital, which led to the killing of 500 people in Gaza in the hospital. Israel, of course, denied it, and even a journalist from Al Jazeera filmed the hit and showed that it was caused by the rocket that was launched by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is another terrorist organization that is operating in the Gaza Strip, and it's the parking lot of the hospital. Of course, that many world channels, news channels in the world, just spread the fake news of that they were getting from the Hamas terrorist organization, and eventually apologized for spreading this news. But of course, the harm was already done, and just fueling anti-Semitism and anti-Zionist and Israeli sentiments around the world. The second example is when a BBC reported that Israeli troops targeted on purpose medical staff in an hospital in Gaza, and afterwards also apologized for forcefully accusing the Israeli Defense Forces for doing a thing that it did not perpetrate. So we have to understand that these kind of full reports are fueling anti-Israeli and anti-Semitic feelings around the world, leading to violent demonstrations around the world. I can tell you that many Israelis and Jews are not feeling safe around the world today. I'm hearing a lot of testimonies from friends and colleagues and also family members that are living outside of Israel, and saying that are hiding their identity as Jews or as Israelis in order not to get to be harmed by other people in the streets, but also in their workplace or universities. Many people around the world do not understand that the main goal of Hamas, a terrorist organization, is not to bring to a peace a solution or two-state solution to the conflict, but to bring to the total destruction of Israel. They are not only declaring it, but it is also written in their charter. And following the October 7th attacks, Israel pointed out two main goals. One is to wipe out a Hamas terrorist organization because of their goal of bringing to the destruction of Israel, and because of the horrible and horrific attacks that it perpetrated to the state of Israel, but also to bring to the release of all hostages. So now, as I mentioned before, the release of hostages is doing for now gradually and in different rounds. Yesterday was the second round of releasing 13 Israelis. Today, we are waiting for the third round to take place, still with a lot of uncertainties, because Hamas during the two first rounds delayed the release of the hostages while saying that Israel is not following the agreement that was signed between or agreed between all the parties. Of course, that Qatar and Egypt put a lot of pressure on Hamas in order to continue to fulfill the agreement that was agreed upon all parts. And even the US President Joe Biden, during the weekend holiday of Thanksgiving, also gave a call in order to promote the release of the hostages. Now we have to understand that for the release of each and every Israeli hostages, Israel has to release 3 terrorists from the prisons. The perpetrated terrorist attack in Israel without killing Israelis and other people or civilians and soldiers in the soul of Israel. So we see that the situation is very combustible, filled with a lot of uncertainties and challenges ahead. And of course that there is also the geopolitical aspect of these attacks. We have to understand that for many years, Israel was considered to be a problem in West Asia and other regions in the world. It was very much isolated by many Arab countries. But we see most in recent years that all the dynamics in West Asia and other regions in the world changed, whether it is because of the Arab Spring, the nuclear deal that was signed and then abrogated with Iran, but also the COVID-19 pandemic, which bring to a lot of challenges and changes in the world. And Israel, that was becoming part of a solution to many challenges in the region. For instance, signing the Abraham Accord in 2020 with the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan, in order to bring to prosperity, to peace and stability to the combustible region of West Asia and North Africa. And this is something which is very important to bear in mind, that there are many countries in the world that are not seeing these developments as positive ones. In the recent G20 summit that was held in India, there was also the Middle East, India, Middle East, European corridor that was forged. Many countries, including Saudi Arabia, wanted to be part of a corridor that will bring to the connectivity between India, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan, Israel, and European countries, in order to bring to the connectivity, development, and stability of these countries and their regions. So, of course, that China, Russia, but also Iran and their proxies and other state and non-state actors that are very much part of the axis of terror, mentioning Hezbollah, Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Houthis in Yemen also, that are now a new threat to Israel and other countries in the region, do not see in a positive eye all these different developments that would like to bring to the prosperity of these countries. So we have to understand that today Israel is in the midst of the war, but it is not only Israel's war. We have to understand that humanity was attacked in the October 7th attack, and also human morality and the basic values of civilization. And today, Israel is combating a war that is the war of all civilized countries, because we're combating not only a terrorist organization, but also countries that are supporting and sponsoring these terrorist organizations. So the situation is very challenging. We're doing our best to address all the threats that Israel has to be confronted to with other allies and friends of Israel, such as India, that from the beginning, Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed his unequivocal support to Israel that is fighting terrorism. And as I mentioned in the beginning, India also tragically had to deal with terrorist organization and terrorist attack in its soil. And other leaders around the world, such as US President Joe Biden, but also President Emmanuel Macron, the Chancellor of Germany, and Prime Minister of Britain, and so forth. So we know that there are now two kinds of coalitions of countries that have to address different challenges. We are talking about the coalition of the democratic, modern countries that would like to bring to the prosperity of the world, and what we call in the literature, in the academic literature, the revisionist countries that would like to bring to a new world order and to combat civilization, democratic values, and the stability of the regions in order to promote their agendas, ideology, and interests, not only in West Asia and North Africa, but in the entire world. So thank you very much for inviting me. And I will be more than happy to answer your questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Now it is open to observations and questions. Professor Arvind is also there. If he wants to say something, he can because Arvind
Yeah,
is also
can you hear me?
co-chairing the session.
Can
Yes.
you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Professor Mishra, I would like to
Please
come a
share your
little bit later.
observations.
Yeah, pardon?
Okay, I would like to come a little later, huh?
Okay, it's fine.
Yeah.
Then it's open to observations and questions. Anybody?
Well, let me share my observations on this presentation. Actually, I'm closely watching this conflict situation through media since 7th October. And I'm quite aware of the facts and other things that happened during this period. Except last 2 days when I was over busy in my conference, I could not see television. And now some deal perhaps has finalized or implemented for the release of certain hostages. So I have some points to highlight as I have discussed in my earlier observation on the last paper, the role of United Nations. Here in case of the Secretary of United Nations has blamed Israel for this conflict. So this is highly unfortunate kind of situation that what role UN is playing instead of resolving the conflict, it is trying to blame the victims. And a lot of politics is involved in that. So I'm not going into that, but my point is that the agencies like United Nations are meaningless today. They are not able to resolve any problem. So either it should be restructured in context of today's global needs, because after Second World War situation was very different. And now after so many years, more than 7 decades, situation is very different. Technological developments have taken place. At that time, only one country was having nuclear weapons. And today, many countries have nuclear weapons. So, these are using to threat the other country and to blackmailing the other countries. So, I think that situation has changed a lot. And this veto power, which some certain countries are having, and they are hampered any right decision taken by the majority of the countries in United Nations. If one country veto them, there is no meaning of the resolution. So this kind of undemocratic things should be changed. And I think every country, whether it is superpower or a small country of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, should have similar voting power and similar powers, not unequal powers. It is highly undemocratic in my opinion. So there is a need to restructure this kind of institutions like United Nations today. This is one. Then, in case of Israel conflict, there is a very unexpected kind of reaction throughout the world that is rallying against Israel and in support of Palestine. Very tactically, they are saying we are in support of Palestine. But they are not condemning Hamas. They are not saying it is a terrorist organization. What they did on 7th October, it should be condemned. But they are raising the viewpoint of Palestine issue, Palestine concern. But they forget that Palestinians are full, they support the elected Hamas instead of Yasser Arafat party. They thrown away. They have, I think, killed some of the leaders of that party very brutally. So, Palestine and Hamas are not different. They are representing Palestinians. And in a war situation, the population suffers. when we talk of the women and children's issue in Gaza, we forget case of Ukraine, that after the invasion of the Russia on Ukraine land, lakhs of women and children displaced from Ukraine and took shelter in European countries and also in United States and other countries. How they are suffering at a foreign land, we are not interested in knowing that. And there is no voice, no issue how they are spending their life. Families are broken. Male part are in Ukraine, they are fighting for the country. The children and women folk are living in some other country. We are not talking of this kind of crisis situation when we talk of the gender issues, women and children issues, or elderly people who are not living there. Some of them are living because they cannot afford to go outside Ukraine. We should compare the situations and see that how media is highlighting one case so prominently, and there are certain videos which are being displayed of children having the dead body of a small brother or like that, and playing the victim card, I would say. Then there is no talk of hostages, even after about 2 months. Only Palestine concerns are highlighted by the media, or those who are advocating or who are organizing rallies in different parts of the Europe, United States. They are just talking of Palestine, but not of hostages. They are not saying that hostages should be released unconditionally, immediately. So these are the, dual or you say diplomatic approach. Then role of Russia, China, Iran, and Turkey. You see that world is polarizing now. Okay. And what I pointed out earlier also, authoritarian and Islamic forces are combining together on the one hand, and largely there may be some countries, because in Middle East also, like Saudi Arab, UAE, and some other countries, they are liberal and they are not supporting wholeheartedly Hamas, and they want that this kind of organization should not happen. So, world is polarizing through these two warfares in last 2 years, or are we moving for a wider conflict in the at the global level? These are, I think, some issues which we will know in future only. We can't say, but there are certain tendency that some polarization is taking place at the global level, and both the conflicting situations have implications for transformation of the world order, and two polarized lobbies are in action, and I don't know if these conflicts are not resolved. So what will happen in years to come? Another dangerous tendency or trend is the rallying of the terrorist outfits against Israel, like the Syrian radical elements, or the Houthi and Hezbollah, and particularly the role of Iran is very, very negative in this context, and support to these like China and Russia, which is very important thing which we should understand, that what kind of combinations are taking place. And North Korea's weapons were found, the Chinese were found in Gaza, and they were, it is alleged that they were helping in making tunnels in Gaza. So these type of developments are not good for international relations. Then role of Pakistan. Pakistan is a very funny country, and it has waged war against India for decades on Kashmir, and we have four full wars with Pakistan since 1947. And so that he is a champion of the Islamic cause, and I think Pakistan is the only country who openly supports Hamas. And even one of the terrorist organizations leader went to Qatar to meet the leadership of Hamas and supporting them. So I think, and Pakistan is a country which had its army and other things to any country for anything for money. In case of Palestinians, when there was Palestinians have a revolt against the king of Jordan, the Brigadier Ziaul, who later became the president of Pakistan, he went there with Pakistani army and he butchered Palestinians, 25,000 Philistines in Jordan. And that's why Jordan is not interested to take any refugee from Palestine. Egypt is not interested. Any other Middle East country is not taking the refugee from Palestine. They know these are the problematic people. They will revolt against them. So I think Middle East is also divided on this issue. And I think this is a kind of, I think, a safety valve mechanism which will reduce the conflict based on Islamic ideology in Middle East. So I think this is a positive thing in this conflict situation. IPAC is also important issue why China is not very happy with this resolution at the time of G20 meeting in India. And Islamic fraternity idea, we can see to some extent when there are rallies in different parts of the world in support of Palestine, including India, and division of the population on the basis of this. So I think in today's time, we have to look into all these problems at a global level, that what are the global implications of these things. And lastly, I would say we should re-examine the work of Huntington on the clash of civilization. Are we moving towards that? I think his work was actually rejected almost, but I think there is some strength in the argument of Huntington that there is a clash of civilizations. And I think as Eisenstein also said that modernity is a civilizational concept. So civilization as a concept is also important to understand the present conflicting situation. These are some of my observations.
Thank you very much. Any other observation or questions?
Can I just reply to Professor Singh for just a couple of things that, not all the things that he mentioned, but some of them concerning the UN? Okay, thank you. So thank you, Professor Singh, for your insightful comments. I would like to say that concerning the UN, you are absolutely right. And I think that India for the past few years understood that there is a misrepresentation of many countries today in the United Nations Security Council. When India was a permanent member of the Security Council, it wanted very much to open the doors to other countries to be part of the Security Council and to that will reflect the current geopolitical reality in the world. Many countries are asking themselves why India is not part of the Security Council, is the most populated country today and the fifth economy in the world. Why, for instance, Japan is not part of the Security Council. Germany, which is a leading country of the European Union, but also South Africa and Brazil. We have to understand that today's Security Council is reflecting the reality of the end of the World War II. And of course, then since then, many things changed in the international arena. So I can tell that India, from, I'm analyzing India's foreign policy, but for the recent years is trying to not change the structures of these organizations because it will take time, but is forging unilateral alliances that could bring to this change. There is also, when India most recently was the president of the G20, it opened the doors of the G20 to African countries from the African Union. Being one of the emerging leaders of the global south, there is one of the most significant, it is one of the most significant objectives of India today to give to the representation not only of the developed countries, but also on the developing countries, not only in the UN, but in other international and regional forums. Now, concerning to the Palestinian civilians, Hamas terrorist organization, the PLO, yes, of course, it is a very challenging situation. When we are talking about resolving this conflict, we should ask ourselves with whom Israel should check its end and bring to a peace process in this regard. On the one hand, there is the Hamas terrorist organization who is calling to the destruction of Israel. On the other hand, the Palestinian
Can we discuss
Authority.
these issues after observations and questions?
Okay, yes, of course.
Yeah. So any other observation, any other questions?
Thank you again, and thank you, Dr. VP Singh, Professor VP Singh, for his fantastic insights. Again, Dr. Nina, I just have one observation, or even if you could answer. See, the Israel-Palestinian divide is not new. It's very old. It's all about the land. And Israel is the only Jewish country in the world. Yeah, whereas the Palestinians are an Arab population, which is existent. Let me say it's just prevalent. It's prevalent, pretty much more prevalent than the Israeli Jews, definitely. So there are narratives, definitely, where there are certain spaces. See, one, if we are dealing with a terrorist organization, they can be a scab in the back. They're very, very difficult to defeat, because they are everywhere. They are like, ants spread all over, and catching them all in one place is very difficult. It's not just a military grab, or grabbing a land just somewhere. At the same time, there are certain narratives which also say that it was instigated by Israel, where they have been trying to grab land. Of course, see, the land is thousands of years old. At the same time, everyone's trying to stake claim. Like I said, again, Israel is the only Jewish country in the world, and you only have a small piece of land, whereas the other communities really have a larger portion of what they want, or what they, they just have a larger portion. So what do you have to say about this? Is this really true?
So first of all, it is not only, thank you, first of all, for the question. Can I reply, or we're just waiting for the questions?
You take all questions together, otherwise I don't know was the time limit is there.
Correct.
You note it down?
Yes, I noted. Yes, yeah? Yes.
Any other observation, questions? Professor Singh, Chauhan, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I would like to make a few observations. Thank you, Professor Mishra. Thank you, Professor Singh, and all the others present there. I'm sorry I joined a little bit late today, but whatever I have heard is a very meaningful discussion that was going on, and I was waiting for my turn since I joined late, so I wanted to hear a few more views. But I think that as far as the current situation is concerned, this is only one aspect and only one manifestation of the things. But as far as the question of terrorism is concerned, it's a very old concept. And if you remember that it was India which was suffering the most because of terrorism. And our late Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, was the first, perhaps, in India to bring out this particular concept of terrorism. And in the context when the Western world was not understanding our problems, and the West was saying that, okay, there is nothing like terrorism. I mean, almost nothing like terrorism. This is your misunderstanding, and this is only your law and order problem. And they, on the other hand, blamed India by stating the narrative that India has got its own problem and we have nothing to do with that. But when this 9/11 happened, then the entire world was shocked. And then, for the first time, they started to begin to realize that terrorism is a problem. And, we were dealing with the concept of terrorism in sociology and in other social sciences, but it could not become prominent. And as far as today's paper is concerned, I think that we are all aware about the history of Israel, which in our memory begins about terrorism. It begins from 1967 around, and then to this Olympic hijacking of players, perhaps Munich Olympic. So all these things Israel has faced. And very late, the world could understand the problem of terrorism. And,
Hello, Professor Chauhan. Perhaps
Internet connectivity problem.
there's some problem. So we can shift to another observation or question. Anybody else has any observation or questions? No? Professor Singh, Professor Virendra Singh, can I have some observations first, and thereafter I can, after her response, we can end this session?
Yeah.
Okay.
If Professor Chauhan come, then he may complete his observation.
He may complete, yeah, of course. I have only 2-3 observations, though I have very serious kind of scientific issues involved. Number one, when we compare the first paper with the second presentation, then as far as I recall, Dr. Nataliya, she said that Russian propaganda is mainly centered around that Ukraine has some kind of terrorist inclinations, and particularly Zelensky, once I recall, he was labeled as some kind of a leader of terrorism. So my problem is that the term terrorism, though he said, Professor Chauhan said that I do not deny the empirical reality of what they call terrorism. But the term terrorism can be an objective term or scientific term, because whenever we use the term terror, it's a point of view. Point of view, number one, of the state, those who have control over a state. Remember, I'm differentiating between a state or nation and a country. Country is made of people. And terrorism is only used by the term used by state. State is also can be terrorist for the people, for the citizens, but often we call that a state is not a terrorist state, is an authoritarian state or totalitarian state kind of term we use. So first problem is with me. I'm a student of sociology and social science. I think that we'll have to reflect a little, ponder over a little in great depth to the use of terrorism when we are analyzing any reality scientifically or objectively. This is number one question. So the use of terrorism is also kind of a propaganda, either used by Russian Federation or used by any other America or India or any kind of people. So this is one problem I wanted to state, that the term terrorism is a different one. The second observation, which is also very serious kind, as I said about Ukraine, that Ukraine dominance or subjugation did not start from 2021 or 22. It has been there embedded in the history of the relationship between Ukraine on the one hand and Russia or Russian Federation or Russian Empire or Tsarist Empire on the other hand. So it has been interwoven in the history. When as a social scientist, we study this issue, we study all these kind of things, because then it unmasks the whole reality, the whole aspect. It unmasks, not only it goes into the depth, which for social scientists we need. So therefore, I would observe that this was one point of view which Nina presented. There's can be another point of view, and dialogue is possible only when 2 points of view are there. Dialogue is not possible when only 1 point of view is possible. So we as social scientists have faith in dialogue, so there can be another point of view. And history did not begin on the 7th October 2023 of the rivalry of the wars conflicts between Israel on the one hand and Palestinian people on the other hand. There's one observation. So you'll have to analyze certain kind of things. And of course, I agree that there is a history of Holocaust. I know very well, I'm aware fully well, that half of the population of the Jewish people were killed in this Holocaust. Not in Germany, but Hungary. I visited all these musea all over the world. In Germany, in Holland, which is called Netherlands, I visited the very famous museum of Holocaust. So the problem of Holocaust is a part of history. And this is part of history. Then there was a history of Zionist movement and history of the establishment of Israel and the role of imperialist power, particularly British and America, in establishing that nation or the country. I don't deny that. Some kind of mythical history is also there of the Musa and kicked out all Judaized people from their holy land. That's also part of history. I understand, and I belong to a tradition. Which tradition initiated by a Jew, very famous Jew. So I have some kind of social scientific faith in an analysis of a Jew. So the problem, I'm not. If I am saying Jainism, so Jainism, I'm not anti-Jew or anti-Semitic. The word Semitic can be used for Islamic people, for Christian people, and for Jewish people. The term Semitic. Okay. So the point is that there is another point. In any conflict, there are two parties. Number one, we'll have to understand. And there are 2 points of view we'll have to understand. Not only 2 points of view, 2 kind of wars of propaganda as well. So propaganda is also there. So my question is that this is one point of view we are trying to understand. There's another point of view. is also there. So there may be Arab people, so many Arab people, but you cannot club all Arab people together. The homeland of Arab people are different kind. For Palestinian, historically, they've been, and I know fully well that Palestinian people are Jewish people, are Christian people, and Islamic people. You cannot club, you cannot say that all these Jews. I daily use Haaretz, a newspaper from Israel. Daily I use. And there is another point of view in Haaretz also. In Israel also, there is another point of view. So the point of, I mean, my simple problem is that I'm a social scientist. In order to understand, I'll have to get rid of all these kind of state dominance, subjugation, oppression, and I have to unmask all these kind of things before, I mean, to understand the nature of conflict, nature of war. And then perhaps we can go for a peaceful resolution. So this is I wanted to say. And one observation about authoritarianism. Generally, we say, I mean, point Security Council. Let us study a little bit nature of composition of Security Council. What is it? It is a group of 5 people, 5 nations. And generally, these nations have been those nations, except China, which have been imperial all along. All along imperial. These people. China has joined them. So they are anti. I mean, this is the very idea is authoritarian. Why should there be a Security Council? What is the need of Security Council? Why this is the very idea is authoritarian, right? India can become a part of it, but the whole of Africa is not part of it. Whole of Latin America is not part of it. So where is the South? And India, at a certain point of time, India's rulers may not represent the real South. Similarly, China may not represent the real South, may have imperial implications, inclinations. The problem is that if we are reflecting on UNO, we'll have to reflect upon, we will have to reflect with some kind of a objective scientific viewpoint. This is my another viewpoint. So these are the viewpoints. Last point I want to raise, that when these 2 parties are in conflict, particularly at the macro level, when nations are involved, then there is conflict at different aspects, cultural aspects. Will denigrate culture, the other culture. Gumbrov Viggs, very famous, he was also perhaps Jew. He's a Polish scholar. Gumbrov Viggs in the last century, he said, he gave the first idea of ethnocentrism, not the American social scientist. So he said that these wars and conflict are rooted in ethnocentrism, considering other culture, other religion, other people, the people of dark, people of light. We are people of light. Our children are people of light, and their children are dark. They are barbarian. We are civilized. They are not civilized. He said, he enlightened me that the conflict is rooted always in some kind of ethnocentrism. And this ethnocentrism operates from the local level to the global level. The point is that you want to understand conflict, then sociology may help you. That instead of ethnocentric, you should become relative. You should be relative. Relative in the sense that you should relate yourself to the culture. Every culture has some aspects. Some can be good aspect. I know so many Jews, they are totally against this kind of a war which is going on, because it has undercurrent from both the sides, undercurrent of dehumanizing, alienating people. So I know so many Jews, not only Jews in America or Britain here, but also in Israel as well. So the problem is that we'll try to understand the problem from relativity, not from ethnocentric point of view, right? So that is my observation at the moment. And lastly, I would speak only a sentence. Professor Arvind has come. He can also say something.
Thank you, Professor Mishra. Actually, the internet connection was lost. That is why I had to discontinue from the conversation. But I was hearing some very important comments from Professor Rajesh Mishra, where he has quoted Gumplowicz, and he has also suggested about, you see, the importance of ethnocentrism. I would like to comment a little bit on that issue of ethnocentrism. You know, as the term and the concept denotes itself, that if it is ethno and if it is ethnocentrism, then by its own definition, it has got certain limitations. Now, how can it be, universalized? If it has got its own limitation, then how is it possible that it operates at the national or international level? And if it is so powerful, then there can be some other ethnocentrism somewhere in the world which can also be equally powerful. And if that happens, then the clash of civilization theory may, become important. But as far as I'm concerned, I also think that although the clash of civilization theory suggests something, and I think that till it happens, it gives the people some sort of a confidence that the war is likely to happen somewhere in the near future. So get ready and remain prepared to face a particular sort of a war. But my point is this, that on the other hand, society is also modernizing. Society is also undergoing change. And it may happen that the forces of modernization, the forces of globalization may become very strong. And this sort of, as Professor Mishra has said, ethnocentrism, or as Professor V.P. Singh has said, that he has referred to clash of civilization. These things can, be minimized, to some extent and to a large extent also under the, forces of modernization and under the forces of globalization. Because these forces are technology driven. And I think that when the technology derives the things in a particular way, then these are the negative aspects which we are visualizing at the moment, but there are some positive impacts of technology as well. See, I'll not go into the details, but would simply refer to one example of medical sciences. See, many advances have taken place, and in this, when the whole world is getting benefit of this, then the clash of civilization or ethnocentrism and all the other things may have limited utility and utilization as a concept. So, or on the other hand, if these forces of ethnocentrism and clash of civilization theory becomes really important, then simultaneously we have to see that the forces of globalization and forces of modernization may become very weak. So this is also possible at the moment. But as far as my opinion goes, the forces of capitalism, the forces of globalization, and forces of modernization are very strong. Last comment I would like to make is this, that some of my leftist friends and colleagues have accepted that I asked them the question, why capitalism is thriving, why capitalism is so successful, and what has happened to the Marxist formulations. Then they say that, we did a mistake and we did not realize that capitalism would be so strong. Okay, capitalism came out to be very strong, and we never thought that capitalism would be so strong that we shall not be able to defeat it easily. So these are some of the problems and formulations put forward by some Marxist scholars as well. So I think that we have to wait and see that what happens. But again, I would like to conclude that from my point of view, the forces of modernization, the forces of globalization are still very strong, and the world shall win over on the basis of these forces. Thank you very much, Professor Mishra. Thank you very much, Professor Singh.
You are mute.
Professor Mishra, we cannot hear you.
Yes, Professor Nina, your response.
Okay, so there were many insightful remarks, and I wrote everything, but I will try to
Yes.
as short as I can in order to try and
Take your own time.
Thank you. So first of all, Professor Singh discussed about the difference between Palestine, Hamas, and the Palestinian Authority, and how the Gazan residents elected the Hamas terrorist organization. Now, Professor Mishra, I totally agree with you that we have to hear all sides of one conflict and not just one side in order to bring to a proactive dialogue. But I can tell you that fighting a terrorist organization is very challenging. I can tell you that when the October 7th attack occurred, there were many Palestinian civilians that crossed the border in order to help Hamas terrorists to drag brutally and forcefully Israeli civilians from their homes into the Gaza Strip. What is also very tragic about Hamas terrorist organization is that they are taking their own population as hostages, using them as human shields. We know that they are using civilian infrastructures such as mosques, hospitals, schools, in order to deploy their rockets and combat Israel through these infrastructures, turning them tragically into legitimate targets because they are causing they are posing a threat to the national security of Israel. I can tell you that as an Israeli, my heart cries out for the all the Gazan civilians that are killed, injured in this conflict. As a human being, as an Israeli, it saddens us to see all the tragic and all the horrific, implications of this war on their side as well, because civilians and innocents are not involved in this conflict. They are just hostages in a game that is bigger than them. Israel is doing everything in its power in order to not to cause any harm to civilians, but in different means. For instance, when it is going to strike a certain area, they are warning the population there through different means, whether it is through cell phones, through different flyers that are sent in the sky, through the sky of Gaza to the Gazan civilians, and other means, open and also close the communications means. But what is tragic is that Hamas is not permitting their population to go from a certain area that is going to be struck in order to keep their bases and their central operations, whether they are under the ground or up the ground. And this is something which is very tragic, and Israel also is doing everything in its power in order to diminish as much as possible the civilian casualties. Now, Professor Singh, you discuss about different countries such as Russia, China, Iran, Turkey being part of the revisionist countries that are that would like to bring to a change of the world order. I can tell you that Iran, Turkey are promoting an ideology of extremist Islam, sadly. Just recently, before the October 7th attack occurred, Turkey and Israel normalized their relations in order to bring to prosperity and stabilizing the relations between them. But we all know that President Erdogan is part and is an adept of the Muslim Brotherhood, sadly. And you also mentioned that many Arab countries are not ready to welcome the Palestinian refugees to their soil. We're talking about Egypt, Jordan, and other countries that want to bring Palestinians to their lands, because as you rightly mentioned, Jordan also was in the beginning of the 70s confronted to a security threat from the Palestinians, and there was of course the events of the Black September that led to Jordan to expel all the leaders of the Palestinian, the PLO, to Lebanon and afterwards to Tunisia. And it is a very worrisome threat, not only to Israel, but also to all countries that are confronted to these ideologies of the Muslim Brotherhood and extreme Islamism. Concerning Ms. Bhavani Suri questions, you said that it was mainly a land, or it is reflected as a land conflict. I can tell you that it is very much rooted also in religion. Hamas terrorist organization is trying to justify their acts by taking verses from the Quran, misinterpreting them, and trying to justify their war against Jews, not against Israel and not against Zionists. And this is something which is very worrisome. They're saying, for instance, that in the Judgment Day, when Jews will be hiding behind trees and stones, the trees and the stones will say that Jews are hiding there in order to the Muslim to come and kill them. So we're talking about an extremist ideology. That's to point one verse and one, thing that is very much a religious conflict. Concerning the land aspect, it is important to point out that there was a partition plan between India and Pakistan, but there was also a partition plan that was presented to the Jewish community and the Arab community in British mandate Israel. Tragically, the Jewish community accepted this partition plan because we wanted to resolve this conflict and bring to the establishment of a Jewish state, independent state. But sadly, the Arab community did not accept this partition plan. And when Israel declared the establishment of an independent Jewish state, all Arab countries from Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Jordan just attacked the Jewish state and didn't accept this reality. And concerning the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians, there were some attempts to bring to the end of this conflict because of all the tragedies that it is inflicted not only on Israel but also on the Palestinians. And I can tell you that in the beginning of the 90s, there were also accords that were signed and wanted to bring to a certain kind of resolution between the parties. but sadly, it turned out to be it led to the second Intifada, which were terrorist attacks that were perpetrated in Israel and against Israelis in the beginning of the 21st century. There was also another attempt before that, of the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak that met the chair of the PLO, Yasser Arafat, in order to bring to a resolution and to the end of the conflict. And although Israel was ready to bring to many, or to have many compromises according to land in the West Bank, the chair Yasser Arafat just rejected all the propositions and launched the second Intifada. There was also Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, the Israeli Prime Minister, that tried also to bring to a certain resolution with the current president of the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, that wanted also to give more than 90% of the West Bank to the Palestinian Authority. And Mahmoud Abbas just rejected all the propositions. So we're talking about a very challenging conflict that all sides wanted to bring to a central resolution, but the Palestinian side are always rejecting all the offers and are not ready to compromise on anything. So this is something which is very important to bear in mind. You discuss about the fact that it is very difficult to kill an idea, right? The idea of extremist Islamism and the idea of Hamas terrorist organization. So as the coalition of countries try to diminish the threat of ISIS, so the idea still remains, but they are not posing such an imminent threat as they did in 2014 onwards. So it is true that it is very difficult to kill ideas, but it is very important to diminish national security threats, whether they are immediate or on the long run, in order to bring to a certain kind of stability and not to go back to the October 7th reality that Israel had to confront. And of course, when we are trying to diminish the power of Hamas, we are also trying to free Gaza from the Hamas terrorist organization for the Gazan civilians, trying to find, it is maybe early to think about other alternatives to Hamas leadership, but in Gaza, but we are also thinking about the innocent in the Gaza Strip as well. So this is something which is very important to bear in mind. Now, Professor Mishra, you discussed about this central, about many aspects of this conflict. You discussed about terrorism. It is true that terrorism, there is no one term that is accepted in the academic literature. It is a very flexible concept. There is one term that is, or definition that is accepted in the literature, but it is still under discussion. It is in general, what the literature said is that it is promoting political aspirations or interests through violence. So this is one of the definitions that is accepted in the literature. Of course, there are other definitions and concepts in this regard, and this is why it's so it is very challenging to combat this concept and this threat in different countries. And you discussed about ethnocentrism and about many Israeli criticizing the government, the Israeli government. And I can tell you that as a democratic country, it is okay to criticize Israel and not being why not being anti-Jew? We are a pluralistic society that welcomes all kinds of views, whether they are for and against certain policies that the government of Israel is promoting. But that does not mean, of course, that everyone that is criticizing Israel is directly anti-Jew or anti-Zionist for this regard. So I totally agree with you that me also an Israeli, there are some policies of the government that I can criticize because I have the privilege to be a citizen of the democratic country. And I can tell you that also now with the agreement concerning the hostages, there are many voices that are criticizing the points that were agreed about all parts regarding the release of the hostages, but also about the continuation of the war between all parties. So yes, we are a democratic country. We are conducting our war under, following the international law and international rules of law. And of course, there are many criticism that is rising not only from the people, but also in the cabinet war in Israel and the different parties that are comprising the Israeli government. So just to give my remarks on Professor Chauhan, insightful remarks on ethnocentrism, continuing Professor Mishra's remarks, and globalization and modernization. It is true that globalization brought a lot of good things on the table. We're talking about the digital transformation that led people to be connected, and I think that this conference is a great example of it, coming from different parts of the world and being able to discuss in an international conference. And of course, all the modernity and advancements that technology brought to the world, but it also bring a negative implications, such as worldwide terrorism and international crimes, and maybe propaganda and fake news. And each and every person that owns a phone is becoming a journalist, and it is very difficult to differentiate between facts, views, and propaganda. But I think that today, thanks to modernity, we can tackle and we can confront these challenges together as a whole with partners in the world, whether they are countries, NGOs, and the civil society that can come together in order to bring to a proactive dialogue that could address all these threats and challenges in the world. So I think that I was able to reply to all your remarks, and I thank you for raising all these important issues to the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, both Nataliya and Nina, for such nice presentations and very explicit presentations. As I said earlier, right in the beginning, that these two wars or conflicts are, I do not have any doubt in my mind that they represent the crises we are facing, the mankind facing nowadays. There's hardly any doubt. I would end with two observations of one my very good scientist friend. Once he said that controversies and debates, if found in any discipline, any social science, any science, any discipline, and as presented in a seminar situation, they tell us that science or that discipline is thriving. Without controversy, without debates, hardly there is any science thriving or developing. So once he said, so I would say that this is highly debatable, is one point of view which was presented our two friends. This is one point of view, one perspective. We need another perspective to have some kind of a debate and dialogue. The second, I am reminded of our founding father of sociology, Emil Durkheim. He, in his rules of sociological studies or method, he said that get rid of all prejudices, all preconceived notions before understanding, before studying, analyzing any phenomenon. And that's true for this war situation, this war also. So I would end with saying, still I'm saying this at the cost of any misunderstanding as well, that both wars, one war at Ukraine and another war, ongoing war, is of Israel versus Palestinians. And these both wars cannot be analyzed in terms of only using that one side is terrorist, the other side, one side is barbarian, one side is uncivilized, one side is unmodernized. We cannot say. I mean, this is a part of conflict that we denigrate culture, people, societies, and religions, politics of the other side. Perhaps it would be better when we understand through some kind of more enlightening, more objective, more not prejudicial concepts, but more objective concepts. So that is my understanding. Perhaps this war also, if you don't mind, friend Nina, I'm reminded of two Israeli Jews. One is, he lives here in England, in the University of Exeter. He's a historian, Ilan Pape, a very famous historian of Palestine, what he calls. And another is Gideon Levy, very famous column writer in Israel. Gideon Levy. I mean, I would end by saying them that they consider that in Israel, particularly, there are three kinds of citizens. One are those who have Zionist origin, Israeli people, Israeli Jews. This is one kind of citizens. Another is Arabs, those Palestinian Arabs who live in Israel, that part of Israel which is not Gaza or not Western Bank. They live in other part of Israel. These are different kind of citizens. They have different kind of rights. Arab political parties have different kind of rights. And there are third kind of citizens, which in fact are governed by, ruled by, disciplined by Israeli forces. They are Palestinians. They are Israeli. So would you mind that when South African president says that there is some element of differences between the three kind of citizens, it can be called as some kind of apartheid. So, of course, Israel may be a democratic Jewish state, but when you are one religious state, one cultural state, and other cultures, other religions, their religious groups have limited rights, then it cannot be called properly a democracy. So sorry for this comment, but I would end. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, it was making in democracy, particularly after 2014. The Maidan, what Maidan it is called, I forgot the name, the Maidan event. After that, they started becoming democratic. So one burgeoning democracy, one evolving democracy, making democracy was controlled or was attacked by the Russian Federation. As I said, either socialist imperialism prevailed in Russia in the times of Soviet Union, or Tsarist times, Russian Empire was there. So with this understanding of mine, is a very complex issue. And thank you very much for both of them that you have enlightened us. You have given 2 points of view. Thank you very much. And thank you, Professor Singh, you have given this opportunity to...
Before we close this session, I would like to add to the comments of Professor Rajesh Mishra, the last part of his comments as a chairman, that the term democracy or the notion of democracy is a bad concept. In the name of democracy, many things can be done in different countries, in different types of society. And if you see that in case of particularly Israel, if you see as a nation or as a country, I think if they have not adopted this model, if they have given full right to Palestinians, so there was no point of having a Jew nation. The very foundation of the Israel would be in danger, because if they will become minority in that their own country. So I think there are strategical mechanisms to remain in dominance on that land. And I'm not going into the value judgments whether it is good or bad. And but in my opinion, I think this was the only solution they could have when they established themselves as a nation, and when after 3 wars they extended their boundaries. And I would give a parallel example of this in India. What today we are facing similar kind of problem because of democracy we have adopted in 1947, giving equal rights to those who were supposed to go after partition to Pakistan. So this problem we have to face. So every country have its own strategy. We adopt it, okay, we will give equal rights, but every country has a right whether they give equal right to some community or not. So democracy, there are varieties of democracy. I think it is an ideal type of concept if we take democracy as a concept. But in real sense, if I use Max Weber, real formation will be very, very different, and ideal type will not exist. Even Russia talk of democracy, no. So which is totally authoritarian state. There no one can raise voice against the government, and they also say we are elected for lifetime. China also says that we have resolved that Jinping will be lifetime president of China. So in the name of democracy, different countries are doing different things. So we cannot use this concept in explaining the real formation. Real formation takes place and how it resolves its problem. Because nation has to resolve its problems. Conceptually, it may be problematic, but when you have to resolve your problem, you have to develop a strategy. And that is the real one. So reality and abstraction from the reality are two different things in my opinion.
Thank you very much. But my point was only simple, that when you would have 3 kinds of people, citizens, 4 kinds of citizens, then the conflicts would always continue. That's the simple point. Conflicts cannot be, they would continue. They would continue. That's the problem. That's the point. Conflicts would continue. all kinds of conflicts would go on.
Yeah, definitely. Conflict is the part of life.
You want to say something?
But
Nina?
it is important to say that the Arab Israelis have equal rights as Jews. I can tell you that some of the Arabs are also are part of the IDF. They are working together. I have colleagues. They are studying in universities. They are working in hospitals. They are advocates. They are all equal rights as the
Different
Jews.
education system. Different education system for them. For
This
them, Arab people, different education system.
Education,
Different localities, they live in
system.
differently.
But I can tell you that when they are coming to the university, there are special programs that are integrating them into Israeli universities before they are starting their studies. And this is something which is very important to bear in mind, that there are many Arab Israelis that condemned Hamas, that are speaking very openly about it, and they are not afraid to express their views. And there are also Arab Israelis, whether they are Bedouin, Druze, Christians or Muslims, that are combating side by side with their Israeli colleagues in the army and soldiers and counterparts in order to bring to the stability in Israel. And also the parties, there are parties in the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament, have equal rights as each and every member of parliament in Israel. And I can tell you that they have immunity. Some of them in the past used it against Israel when they were in contact with Hezbollah, for instance. So just to show you how complex and challenging the situation.
Thank you very much. Someday we would discuss this, your constitution and your constitutional rights to these different kind of people.
We do not have a
constitution. Someday we would like to discuss
this. We do not have, tragically, we don't have,
we can read your constitution someday.
We do not have a constitution in Israel. We have basic laws.
Well, I think it was a very long and very thought-provoking discussion, and a different from what is generally discussed in other platforms. The purpose of organizing this session was to have an inside view of these two conflicts from Ukrainian perspective and from the perspective of Israel. It was not, there are no representative of the other, opposite parties in this. But I think in a sociology, presence of sociologists, we have the training to discuss things in an objective manner and to give conceptual and theoretical, input to the issues which are very relevant at a particular point of time. And in fact, we want to understand different types of societies, because Israel is one kind of society different from the society in which we live. Ukraine is another type of society, has its own socio-cultural matrix and their issues. But what is common in these two, both are now, have problem of their existence. The attacks, continuously attacks from 7th October on Israel are challenging their very existence, and the Iran's role in that, the proxies of Iran's in form of different organization, whatever you call terrorists, you call non-state actors, or whatever terms you use conceptually. But that is a very dangerous trend for not only for Israel, but I think for many countries of the world. Tomorrow, India can also face this kind of situation, that this kind of non-state actors, non-military forces can attack on any country from anywhere. So this is a danger to the global order. This kind of challenge may be faced by any other country. And I think this was the reason that why India has taken the stand without wasting any time, that we condemn any form of terrorism. Okay, terrorism, according to Professor Mishra, is again a propaganda, but you may call some other term for that. But we cannot say that India have not faced this problem in the last 40 years. There was a situation that people were not safe in going even to the market. In the middle class market of New Delhi, Sarojini Nagar, there was a blast in the evening when it was the prime time for the shopping, and more than 200 people were died. So what you will call? You will not call it terrorism, or you will not call it insurgency, or whatever you can say. But I think it is a reality, and what Professor Arvind Chauhan said, that the world was not ready to accept this term. There is some kind of, and there was also a classification: good terrorism and bad terrorism. Maybe political, but these terms have been used. I think we have to think over this problem. And I also remember when I was in Bhopal, one content analysis exercise was conducted by Professor Chauhan on insurgency in Kashmir. At the time, insurgency term was being used. There's different terms in different point of time, in different types of society. But I think conflicting situation, in more easier term, which is more acceptable, we'll say conflicting situation exists in society. Always, historically, you see, there is no society without conflict. Conflict and cooperation are two important aspects of every society. But when intensity of conflict increases to that extent, then it becomes a bigger problem. And when it challenges the existence of a society or country, then it has to be dealt in a different way, not in a normal way. Then military solution is the only solution. There is no other solution. That is my last comment before we close this session. And this session has spilled over 43 minutes more than the scheduled time. But I'm happy that listening to both of you, Slama and Nataliya, Butyrska, that fantastically you have presented. And before I close, I think Nataliya Butyrska is listening for over a long time, and this is the last chance before we close. If you want to share anything, then I will close after your comments.
It was very important that we had the same panel about two conflicts, because when we started this conference, there are no local conflict, for example, in Ukraine or in Israel or in another part, because their war is global, very interconnected. And if we see after Ukraine war, some conflict situation around the world are rising now. And the dangers of new conflicts and new wars are very big now. Look at North Korea, which started to be more braveful in its rocket programs, and look, Hamas and Hezbollah and other parts, like states and also groups, terroristic groups. For Ukraine, it was not easy to express its vision about this war at the beginning. When President Zelensky started to tell to other presidents and leaders from around the world, and told that Ukraine war, it's not only Ukraine war, it's not only Russia-Ukraine war, it's a big war from around the world, and asked to support to end it as much as faster. But for example, for countries which are very far from Ukraine. It wasn't an issue for their immediate interest. And also the problem was that Russia propaganda put its own characteristics to Ukraine. As I mentioned, Ukraine terrorist country, for example. And it was not easy. And now it's not easy for Ukrainian government authorities to destroy this concept that put it for our country. And now our diplomats are working very hard for example, in Asia, from all countries, in Africa. Our ministry did, I don't know, maybe 10 or more visits to African countries, and with Latin America to change their mind, to change their vision on this war, on Ukraine as a country. And I would like to tell you my very big I'm thankful for this possibility, for this discussion, because I can share our vision and I can hear vision of India and other countries about these issues. And also it's very important for us to understand each other and to have a good dialogue. Nowadays, it's a very important thing for all of us, which would like to live in the peace in Israel, in Palestine, in India, in Ukraine, in other countries. Thank you very much.
And lastly, I would like to, what is the status of Kherson at present? Because I came to know from the news that it has been regained by Ukraine. Is it correct?
Kherson city was regained by Ukraine. It's Ukraine city, as you know, south part of Ukraine, and last year Ukraine regained it, and now Ukrainian army is forcing to regain other parts of Kherson region, which are southern and close to Crimea, and we have a small success in that region.
Yeah. I am following it very closely. So I was interested to know from you what is the exact status, because media sometimes do not give the exact position.
No. Kherson is under very strong shelling of Russian army, because it's close to Crimea, and Russian army could send all types of weapons to this poor city, poor people. It's a very bad problem. It's a very bad situation now for people of our Ukrainian Kherson.
Well, thank you very much for your observation and comments and information. You have first-hand information provided to me. And I think now I am very thankful to the speakers of this session, Nataliya, Butyrska, and Slama, who on my request agreed to present their viewpoint in this session of our conference. This conference is organized by Global Research and Education Foundation India, and this organization organizes international conferences every year. This is our annual conference, and we are closely associated with the International Sociological Association, and there is a working group of International Sociological Association, and I am heading or chairperson of that working group also. So jointly we have organized this conference. And later, next year also, we may organize in India. Generally, we organize in New Delhi, but I'm thinking to have an interim conference of the ISA Working Group 01 abroad. So it is open if anyone want to interested to organize this conference, we can go for that also. I am waiting that to normalization of situation in Ukraine so I can visit Kyiv. So I am very thankful to Professor Rajesh Mishra, a friend of mine since my student life. He is 1 year senior to me when we were studying at Merit University, and I was discussing with my fellow colleague about our student life that how we were studying in the library of Merit University and going in the morning at 9 o'clock and up to 8 o'clock night, and we were walking together after getting down on a particular bus stop to our respective homes. So we have a very long association, and he's a very seasoned intellectual and sociologist we have in our country, Professor Rajesh Mishra. And Professor Arvind Chauhan is also my friend from student life when I was doing master's degree. And since then, we are more than decades friendship, and we are also in the same discipline, and also friends, also professional colleagues. And when we meet in this kind of conference or seminar situation, although we have very different perspectives intellectually, Professor Chauhan's orientation is different. He is more near to Parsons and Weber, and Professor Mishra is thinking is more or less is more Marxian. I am having a rather balanced one, not but more near to Durkheim intellectually, the French sociologist who is the founding father of sociology. So I am thankful to Bhavani, Suri, and have you arrived Bombay?
Yes, sir. I was traveling in the morning, so
She
that's
was
why I
in
got.
Delhi till today morning. Now she joined from Bombay for this session especially. So although not many, then Ruth Kherbemon is a faculty member of sociology in a northeastern state. Yes, that is, she is in Shillong, that is in Meghalaya. She has to present paper in the session for which she is waiting. And another MPhil scholar from Devolina Ghosh is also there. She is Bardwan, I think. Devolina? Correct, she is not there. Only window is there. So I think now this is time to say bye-bye. For some time, we'll meet again in some other conference or in some other academic situation. And I would like to have more interaction to Nina Slama, because she's working in a university, I think, in Israel. So let us have some academic collaboration. What is your discipline, basically? International relations.
International relations with a focus on India's foreign policy.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Nina Slema and Nataliya Butyrska. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Namaskar, thank you.
Okay. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.